Hey guys, welcome to Quinian's Budget Crafts. A lot of my views tend to come from subscribers, but YouTube says that I have a lot of views recently from non-subs. So I'm guessing if that's you, you're locked down, bored, and don't have much for supplies. No worries, I got you covered. This build is trash. Or, well, it's mostly made from trash. This is a box of K-Cups. I think Amazon sent me the wrong one, but hey, whatever. This is a business card holder from the dollar store. You don't have to have this, but I kind of like the way it looks, so I'll go ahead and use that. And we'll need some pretty thin cardboard to put little skirts around the building. This cardboard is just from one of those little shipping boxes, like if you bought something on Etsy that I sent you, it would come in one of these. Again, you don't need this exact box, just some really thin cardboard that doesn't have like the super thick corrugations on it. To cut up this business card holder, all you really got to do is snip the little mesh in between, and then score or cut in half the braces on the edge and just bend it until it breaks. I'm going to use this for the ramp to get into the building. The inside of this box has the folded over cardboard. It looks really ugly, so I'm just going to cut a piece of foam to stuff in there. Again, you don't have to have the foam, just a big enough piece of cardboard would be fine, but I don't have very many large cardboard boxes, so I'm using the foam here. Just cut it to size and stuff it down in there, and there we go. That's a much nicer floor. Of course, if you closed off this hole here, you wouldn't have to worry about it. Now we'll take some thicker cardboard and cut out some pieces to make the door here. What I want to do is make two matching pieces that fit so that they're like notched. You could actually do this out of one by just drawing your line on it and then cutting along that line, but I'm no good at that, so I'm going to do two different pieces. Just draw your line on there and cut it out. And now we have matching door panel things. Grab a couple more pieces of cardboard and figure out about how long you're going to need them to be. These will act as the frame that holds the door. You can fill in these corrugations with some hot glue. You just squirt it on there and then use the hot tip of the glue gun to rub it smooth. Just be careful not to burn yourself. I mean, it is hot glue. Once you got that all figured out, you can go ahead and put a little bit more glue in there, and then use the door panel and then the two framing panels to make a cardboard sandwich thing. Then your little cardboard sandwich will fit right in the frame just like this. Go ahead and cut out another one to go across the top, just to hide that oval opening from the box. Fill in the corrugations and glue it right on. If you have little gaps like this, you can just go ahead and put some hot glue on there, give it a little bit to dry, and then use the tip of the glue gun to rub it smooth. Trim the bottom of the frame if you need to, and then put another little piece across the bottom. And now you can go ahead and glue in your ramp. Just put a little bit of glue on the cardboard, stick the ramp on it, and then tilt the box over so we can reach inside there and put it along the back. You're never going to see this, so it doesn't need to be clean, it just needs to be strong. Now you can dig through your assorted pile of little thin cardboard bits and stick them on the building as little panels. If you want to give it some more detail so it's a bit more interesting, you can trim the corners off. Just put a little glue on it and stick it right on there. Just keep trimming the corners and sticking the pieces on until you think you've got enough panels. There's no right or wrong here, it's just whatever looks good to you. And if you put one on and it doesn't look good, just take it off and do something else. Once you're all done with that, go ahead and cut out some strips for the skirting. To glue those on, you just put a little glue on there and stick it. It'll be a little bit wobbly right now, but that'll be stronger in a little bit. So just trim them all, figure out what angle you want them to be, stick them on there. If you get a little too much glue sticking out of the top, you can just wipe that off. Once all your skirting panels are on, you're going to need some corners. For that, you just make a little shield-shaped piece here and bend it right in the middle and stick it on there. It's going to take a little bit of messing with it, trimming it, holding it up, trimming it more until you figure out what shape's going to work for what you're trying to do. If they're a little bit off, they're not quite fitting perfectly, that's fine. You can trim them after as long as it's close enough. Once you get a masterpiece done, you can use that to trace out for your other pieces and cut a bunch more. Well, 3 more, you need 4 total. Just cut them out, put them up against the edge of your ruler so you have something sharp to bend it against, and there you go. Just like the other pieces, just put a little glue on there and stick them right on. You may have to hold it in place for a second because it's going to try to like flex and come off of there. Then you can seal any little gaps around the top edge of your skirting with some hot glue. Just squirt it on there, try not to get too much. To reinforce it, you can flip the box over and put more glue on the underside. Just be careful not to melt the glue that's already there, or you'll have a bigger mess than you started with. And like I said, if those corners were too big or they didn't fit right or something weird going on, you can just trim them off. Now, we need to put bullet holes in it. So take your favorite pokey tool of choice and just start stabbing it. You can do patterns, you can do it random, whatever you want to do. I like to have a couple that are right on the edge of the plate there, so it kind of looks like it smeared the edge of the plate. If you want some of the holes that come in at an angle, it's just exactly what it sounds like. Just start stabbing it at an angle. To add a bit of variety to this thing, I've got a big old bag here full of dollar store toys. You obviously don't have to use new toys. You can use old broken ones or just about anything. You could probably make some of this stuff yourself. But I've got the bag full of toys, I'm going to use those. Wasn't real sure what I wanted. Definitely some sandbags, maybe the helicopter or something. These fence things, I think they're supposed to be barbed wire. They look terrible. I might have to do something else with those another time. So just pick out a few toys and we'll use those to decorate this thing a little bit. But first, go outside and spray paint the whole thing black. For the toys, I went ahead and spray painted the sandbags and everything green, and I spray painted the flag in the silver. To add some rivets to these panels, I'm using those things that you stick on your face for whatever reason. I've shown those before. Again, you don't have to have these. If you're new, you don't have all this kind of crazy stuff I've got. You can just use regular like hot glue blobs or anything really, just something that kind of looks like a rivet. But if you are using these little gems or a grain of rice or whatever you want really, best way to stick them down is just with a little dot of super glue. So I need to put a top on this box because it looks really strange the way it's closed up there with the tape and the seam and everything. So just flip the box over and trace it out on a larger piece of cardboard and then cut that out. My knife is getting a little bit dull here, so I'm going to snap off the little breakaway blade thing. Now, these things can be really, really dangerous because it's just like a little tiny piece of razor blade floating around in your trash. That's terrible. Please do not give your doctors and nurses extra work to do right now. A good way you can dispose of these things without causing a problem is to coat them in hot glue and stick them in another piece of cardboard like this, and now they will not cut a hole in your trash bag or a hole in you. But anyway, go ahead and trim off all the, around the line where you drew for your lid. There are a lot of ways that you could glue this to the top. You could use super glue, you could use hot glue, Elmer's glue, whatever. What I'm going to use, and if you have it, you should definitely use it, is Super 77. It is a spray-on adhesive. I'm going to use that because it doesn't wet the cardboard, and it doesn't warp anything, and it sticks immediately. Like you put it down and it's stuck now. Same thing with that corrugation. Just put a little hot glue in there and then rub it smooth. Or, you could wrap it in paper or put like a rim around the top of the building. Anything you want to do. Just hide that corrugation because that's a dead giveaway that you've used a cardboard box. So if you've watched other crafting channels, or mine for that matter, you probably see that most of us have, all these brushes, or maybe even an airbrush. But you don't have that. We can use whatever cheap stuff you might find in your garage. Like one of these synthetic brushes, or one of these foam brushes, or even one of these little chip brushes. This is about the only place I'm going to get kind of stupid, because I'm going to use a lot of different paints. Because I'm not using a lot of cool stuff on the building, I'm trying to keep that as simple as possible. In order to still make it look good, I'm doing a lot of different paint. Now this is completely unnecessary. You could get away with just using whatever spray paints you've got on hand, make it look like an apocalypse building or whatever. But I have the paints, so that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to baste this in gray and silver. Don't pay any attention to the exact colors or whether it's metallic or whatever, that doesn't matter. Just gray and silver to get that kind of old was metal once upon a time look. So this being not a good brush at all, what I'm trying to do is get most of the paint off on the larger areas and then spread the paint around so I don't get too much of the lighter grays into the cracks. I do want the cracks to, retain dirt and whatever else. So they would be darker. I'm also not trying to completely coat this. If I were, I would just use a paint roller and be done with it. I want it kind of splotchy and old. Plus, I gotta say, this is the most fun I've ever had painting, just going crazy with giant, ridiculous brushes. I might do this more in the future because it's fun. Now I'm going to use a little bit of metallic blue. Doesn't have to be metallic, just a light blue, sky blue, baby blue, one of those. That is to get that shinier metal thing going on. I'm going to use a foam brush for that, but I don't want to use the entire brush. It's too big. So just rip a little chunk off of there, the rougher the better. Then you can take your rough chunk and get a little bit of paint on it and splotch it around wherever you think there would be highlights. It might have gotten scuffed or paint came off, that kind of thing. If you get too much of that blue in one area, it's no problem. Just take your other brush with the grays on it and kind of go back over it a little bit to blend it in. Now I'm going to take a little bit of white and, still using the sponge, get a little bit less paint on there and use that for edge highlighting. Just going over all the edges. Don't forget the corners of the building, your little corner pieces, all that stuff. It's kind of the same idea as the blue, but this is more focusing on the edge and not really getting the white in the middle anywhere. It does look kind of ridiculous at this stage, but it makes more sense as we add more things. Now with all these bullet holes on there, you can use a silver Sharpie and go through and just poke each one of them. You're probably going to want to wait for your paint to dry to do that. I didn't and started to mess up my Sharpie, so don't do that. Let the paint dry, then do it with a Sharpie. Also, you might want to do that after you've done your black wash and that stuff to brighten them up to make them look fresh. Depends on how fresh you want them to be. For this doorway here, I want the black and yellow stripes, but I want them to be, not perfect, but consistent, I guess is the word I'm looking for. So just use some scissors and cut a perfect little wedge out of your foam brush and put some black and yellow stripes on it. I'm not trying to make them completely dark, I just want them on there. Like, this place is supposed to look old and overrun. That's why a metal bunker is going to have sandbags on it. Do try to keep your spacing and your line angle consistent. Mine's not really, but I actually kind of like the way it came out. You can be a little sloppy on the black as long as the yellow is neater than that, because you can go over the black where you were sloppy with the yellow. And if you got streaks, you can just go through and kind of pat it with the sponge to get rid of the streaks. So I know I'm going to want to put a helicopter on the roof of this thing, so it's going to need the H with the circle for the helicopter landing pad. So go ahead and do that as long as we have the yellow out. But I need a stencil, so I cut a hot chocolate tin down and then a grits canister. And that'll give me 2 circles, then it'll leave a circle in the middle. That way I can just sort of trace that in with a pen, and I'll have a little thing to paint in, the stencil. Then just go ahead and take your yellow and paint it on. Then if you get a little bit of black on your sponge there with some yellow in it, you can go back over your stuff to try to dull that down a little bit. The yellow I used here is really bright. But just go through, patting around the yellow with the black mixed in, and it'll blend in eventually. So this stuff here is a homemade black wash. It is mostly black paint mixed with water and a drop of dish soap. I've also mixed in brown and green on purpose, and countless other colors because I just dipped my old dirty paintbrush in that and used it to black wash things. So who knows what color it is at this point? Mostly black. What this stuff does is it adds a bunch of detail and definition for you in between all these little cracks. It will also darken everything, so if you're worried about it being too dark, you want to paint brighter than you want it to be when you're done. I'm going to use the sponge that I've been using for everything else, get a little bit of white on there just to help add to the what in the world is on these sandbags, and go through kind of patting it everywhere. You can even mix in a little brown on purpose if you want to, and if you mix more brown in it, you can go through and add it to the base of your building to look like mud and grime. Of course, don't neglect your ramp the whole time you're doing all these different things. If you're trying to get something that is hollow to stick to something, there's nothing for you to glue to, you can just fill the cavity with hot glue and put it down, and the hot glue will run out and stay there. For rust, I'm going to use a little bit of copper and a little bit of red and some water. and then a little chunk of this chip brush. I already tore up another chip brush, so I don't want to tear this one up just yet. So go ahead and pull the metal band off your chip brush, and you'll have this wood block with the bristles glued to it on the inside. And you go to pull those bristles off, they come off in these little chunks. Those make a handy improvised little paintbrush. Just mix up your copper and red and start putting it wherever rust would be. All along the top of the panels, running down the side, around the bullet holes. If you put too much in one spot, you can go in with a paper towel and dab it off. Also, when you're mixing these, if you keep your colors and the water separate, you can remix them as you go to get a little bit of variation. Some of it's more red, some of it's more copper, some of it's real heavy, some of it's watered down, thin, that kind of thing. The more variation you have, the better it usually looks. This helicopter needs some damage. You can't have it sitting on a building this messed up and the helicopter's all nice. So this is where if you have a broken toy, that's great. This one's not broken, but it does have a weird line here, so I'm just going to go ahead and snap the tail of it off. And then I'll trim some of these rotor blades, try and scratch up and gouge the window as best as possible. Whatever plastic they use for this window is really thick. If you've got something really sharp and pokey, like a dental tool, you can use that to stab through the window and the body of the helicopter to put little bullet holes in it. Just be very careful not to stab yourself. I kind of like the color this helicopter is already. I don't think it really needs anything, so I'm just going to go ahead and put some rust on it, and I'll do more black wash on it later. These dollar store toys do tend to have a bunch of mold lines on them. If that's going to be a problem for you, you can sand them down with sandpaper, a fingernail file, a regular hand file, whatever. Do anything scratchy. You can probably scrape it off with a, heat it up with a lighter and use your thumbnail. But if you don't want the line there, go ahead and sand it off. And then we'll just hot glue it straight to the roof. These little rotor blades are too small for hot glue. It would make a mess, so I'll just use super glue on those instead. Doesn't really matter where they land, just somewhere near the helicopter. Add a little bit more interest and hide all of these lines here. I'm going to use some glue around the edge of all of these toy pieces. You can use Eileen's Tacky Glue or Mod Podge or Elmer's Glue, or you could use Titebond wood glue if you really want to. It doesn't really matter. You just need some kind of semi-thick glue that'll hold and hide the gaps here. You could probably get away with caulking if that's all that's in your garage. Just add it all the way around all the toys to get rid of all the gaps. And then you can take some dirt and sand and pour it right on there. The kind I'm using is a mixture of some black dollar store grit sand stuff. I'm not real sure what that is. Some sand, like a little kid's sand pit kind of sand, and some fish tank rocks. This is definitely the messiest part of any build, at least for me. Just pour it on there and shift the build around until it gets on all the glue. One of these days I'll get a container to catch all of this stuff that falls off. Then you can go back through with some glue that has been watered down with half glue, half water. Just kind of put that all over the place, and you can stick more dirt to it. That'll also help to hold down the other stuff you've already put on the thicker glue. Another thing that I really like for holding down sand and flocking and that kind of stuff is some hairspray. It works just as good as clear coat, but it doesn't stink, and it doesn't coat everything, and I don't have to do it outside. And you can get a can of it from the dollar store, or you can go steal it from your wife's side of the bathroom. It's starting to look pretty good, but I still think it needs like a gun emplacement. So, nice quick little minigun. As you can take a bunch of toothpicks, 8 of them actually. I think miniguns have 8 barrels, I'm not sure. Trim off the ends of one end of them, and then you can use a barbecue skewer or a chopstick, something like that, just a little bit bigger than a toothpick. That's going to be your central post to wrap all the toothpicks around. Then you can stick all the toothpicks to a piece of tape, put a bunch of super glue on them, and wrap them around the smaller, or the bigger post, shorter but larger post. And go through and trim the back side of them, whatever length you want your barrels to be. Cut off a chunk of popsicle stick, and then hot glue those right to it. This also gives you an opportunity to squirt hot glue in between all of them just to make sure they stay together when you take that tape off. Or you can leave the tape on as like a banding or whatever. Cut 2 more small pieces of toothpick and glue those to the back of your popsicle stick thing. That way it looks like the dual handles you hold onto. For the color on this thing, I'm going to use a color shift. It's one of Folk Art's color shifts. I don't remember what this one's called. It's basically black paint with gold glitter mixed in. So if you don't have this and you're trying to get the same effect, that's pretty much what it is. Black paint or gloss black paint with super fine gold glitter mixed in. Just paint the ball on top of the flagpole a gold or leave it silver, it doesn't really matter. I wanted a gold because it adds some interest to it, I guess. And then paint up the flag however you want. I try to remain kind of neutral with my videos. I usually do the flag as like a planetary flag or something. So I'm going to do this one with like a black field and then something that kind of maybe resembles Earth on it. So this minigun's going to need a stand. I just use one of these little marine mini guys to figure out how tall I want that to be. Take 3 toothpicks, put some hot glue on them, and spread them out into a tripod. Then you can put some hot glue on the bottom of the minigun or on top of your tripod and stick it right on there. Usually with these kind of things, the front leg is forward, so that's something to keep in mind. And for the color of the legs, I'm just going to paint it like a metallic gray, silver kind of metal look. Something you can also do with these chip brushes if you want a finer brush is just pinch all the bristles together and trim them off with scissors so they're nice and even. Figure out where you want your gun to go, put a little super glue on there and just set it down. It'll dry in about a minute. There we go, that looks about right. The helicopter's a little small here, but it's fine. It'll be fine. And as you can see, I've got that little fan over there. It's been blowing on this thing the entire time. This white glue takes a very long time to dry, especially when you put it down thick like that. And sometimes it dries white, but that's okay, because we can go back in with some black wash. Before we do that though, we need to base this thing. I mean, I guess we don't really need to, but I want to. This is a canvas from the dollar store. Again, you don't have to use the canvas. This is just what I have that's the right size for the base of this. I don't have any cardboard boxes that big, but cardboard would absolutely work just fine. I don't want this thing white though, so I'm going to take it out and spray paint it with camo colors essentially. Tan, green, brown, and maybe a little bit of black. There we go, and when we set this on there, it kind of looks like dirt. Of course, you could do, city streets or snow or grassy field, whatever's going to work for you. I just figured dirt seems to fit more with whatever people are doing. To make it stick, super simple, just put a ridiculous amount of hot glue on there and stick it right on. Now that that is solidly on a base, I can take care of this ramp that's been driving me crazy the entire time. Just gently lift it up, put a little bit of hot glue under there, and push the thing down so it will stop moving. Then, just like you did with the toys, go through with the glue and basically seal all the edges. What this will do is help hide anything that's uneven. Like, I'm not great at measuring things and cutting them perfect, so I always end up with something uneven somewhere. This will hide a lot of crimes. Put your glue all over and then put your dirt, sand, rock mix, whatever. Or like I said, if you're doing a foresty field, whatever, you could do snow flocking or like a grassy flock. You can make that yourself out of spices. Some Italian spices and tea leaves works pretty good. You could also use coffee grounds. Just make sure that you dry them out first. Once you got all your dirt down, if you kind of pat it into the glue a little bit, that helps. To get some dirt under this ramp thing, it's kind of difficult, so I'm just going to pour the water down stuff through the ramp, blot the excess out of the little holes there, and just pour it straight through. If a little sticks to the ramp, that's probably fine. And then, of course, go through and hose it down with hairspray. That'll seal all your paints, it'll seal the sand, nothing will be shedding off of it later. It's very important to wait for your paint and glue and all that stuff to dry, and then seal it before you do black wash, because acrylic paints are water-based, and black wash will absolutely wash your paint off. Or at least smear it all together, you don't want that. So normally when I do washes, I would use a nice brush like this one here from Citadel, but first rule I set for myself was no nice brushes, but I still want a small brush. So I'll use some of the chip brush things, but this block is too big to fit in my bottle. So what you can do is take a barbecue stick or a chopstick or something like that, take a little chunk of your chip brush and hot glue it straight to the end of it, kind of like an old school broom. Just coat the whole thing all the way around in hot glue so that it does not come off. And you don't have to worry about the hot glue drying before you start using it to paint, or if you're sticking it in black wash, because the cold water from the black wash will instantly solidify that. Now you can go through and very carefully paint the blackwash exactly where you want it. Mostly I want it heavy on the little seams or whatever where all the glue is still white. And I figured I wanted some more on top of the sandbags too to make the spaces in between each little sandbag stand out better. A little bit around the bottom of the building too. Anywhere there's a seam, any kind of place that dirt and grime would collect, basically. Of course, you can also smear it on the panels and then kind of blot it away with a paper towel to get just a general dirty look. I don't know the words to describe this. You can see what I'm talking about though. And then a generous helping of this stuff all over the helicopter. That'll help to make all the little door panels and those engine vents and all that kind of stuff stand out. Also kind of makes it look like it had a camo paint job at one point. So there you go, a fun little building made almost entirely out of trash. You could definitely do this with your kids. Just, maybe do the cutting for them or have them use scissors or something. I tried not to use the razor knife as much as possible. Have fun painting it. I mean, there's nothing special about it, just go nuts. If you guys didn't spend $5,000 on toilet paper, you can support me over on Patreon. But of course, as always, thank you for watching, everybody. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.